Hey everyone, welcome again to Flutter Atlanta. To all of you tuning in person, thank you for dealing with the crazy traffic here in Atlanta today. It means a lot to see you guys come out here and get to know you a little bit better. To everyone tuning in online, thank you as well. Again, all of these are recorded and all of the code that you're going to see today is also on GitHub. There's a link on the MeetUp page for that, as well as a link in the YouTube description. So first off, my name's Emmett Dean. I'm a manager of engineering here at Black Airplane, and I pretty much manage the entire Flutter team. I have a background in native Android and iOS development, and I've been using Flutter for about 4 years now. I've built over 20 Flutter apps in that time, and we have several more in progress. And I love Flutter so much, I also use it for my own personal projects. I want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane, which is where we're at right now. Thank you for the food, the beer, and for letting us use this amazing space to do these meetups. Black Airplane is a leading development agency in the Southeast, and we have a special team here that produces top quality work, and we're capable of building pretty much anything. Today, we're going to be talking about top Flutter packages. I do want to just remind everybody before we get started, we are using the microphones in the ceiling, so if you say anything, it will hear you and it'll be broadcast live for everybody to hear forever. So don't say anything you would regret, and try not to make too many weird noises in the background just so everybody can hear. Awesome. So let's imagine you're starting a new project and you want to make sure you're efficient. So you go over to pub.dev like we all do, and we start looking at packages to see what's out there, update ourselves, and figure out if we could use it in our projects to be better. But finding packages that help you and that you can trust is a challenge. Pub.dev has now surpassed 45,000 packages. Just like some of the other package managers out there like NPM, it's starting to get to dangerous territory where you don't know what's going to be maintained and what to trust. So how should you choose? Well, Flutter gives us some great metrics on their pub.dev website to be able to help reliably choose which packages we should use. One key thing you can look out for is in this top right here, the Flutter favorite. This is something that's actually been selected by the Flutter team as something that they support and recommend that you use. But not all packages are going to be reviewed by them, and the best tell, in my opinion, is going to be these three metrics right here, which are going to be your likes, your pub points, and your popularity. So your likes are honestly just people like you and I that go and vote whatever the package is. Pub points are going to be these criteria below, talking about following Dart file conventions, providing documentation, platform support, static analysis, making sure all their dependencies are up to date. And then the last is a popularity percentage, which is basically saying how popular or how much is this package. So these three key metrics can really help you determine if you should or should not use a package. If it doesn't support all of these metrics, it may be new, and that's okay. You just need to make sure that you do your research. And when I say do your research, look on GitHub for issues and activity. More issues is not always a bad thing. A lot of times issues are feature requests or show that a lot of people are using this package and it's likely to get fixed if there are problems. But look at the last updated time and just make sure you're using packages that are being actively maintained in your project and have a lot of support, because that's going to get you the best results down the road. So be prepared. Using open source is always a risk. You never know if something's going to break. So just keep in mind, if you're using an open source package, you should be prepared to quickly replace it if something goes wrong, or completely fix it yourself. So just be prepared. Whenever you're using somebody else's code, you're always taking on a little bit of a risk here. So now let's dig in. Let's look at some of the packages that we use often here. And to do this, we're going to take a look at a little example app. So I've actually designed this example app after a Flutter take-home interview that I built. So this would be like my answer to an interview question like this. These interview projects are becoming pretty popular now, and this answer is all on GitHub if you want to review it and see what you think and compare it to how you would build it yourself. But essentially, this app is going to show us one of our favorite things, a whole bunch of different types of coffee, and it'll be able to click in and see the ingredients there and a brief description. You can also add and remove it to your favorites. Throughout this, there's almost 10 different Flutter packages that were used to build this app in a sustainable and scalable way. So just keep an eye out for this. It's going to be really simple. I have it running in the background. And yeah, let's hop into that just really quick. Some things you should know. The coffee actual data is coming from a mock API that's included in this project. So we can look at that really quickly. There's an API folder here, and this is a simple Node.js backend that's pretty much just going to listen on port 3000 for a specific endpoint and then return you this little sample.json as the response. So all these items are just going to have a title, a description, ingredients, image, and then an ID. So if you're going to run this locally on your own machine later, just make sure to read the README that will tell you just to navigate to this folder, run npm install, and then npm run dev. And it'll spin up this little API for you to play with. All right, now that we've taken a brief glance at the project, let's talk about our first package. So our first package, as you can see, over 6,000 likes, perfect pub points, and 100% popularity. This is just a package you're going to see all over, and that's the HTTP package. So this is actually how we're going to interact with this API. So to do this, sorry, I have this blown up really big so you guys can see it, so it's going to take me a minute to navigate around here. But we basically built this API provider in our data layer, which is just going to spin up this HTTP client. And for this example, I only needed to make a GET request. So for this example, you very easily can pass it an endpoint, make this request, and then return that data out of it. This is going to return a response object that we're going to then process and actually turn into the models we're going to interact with in our domain layer later, which we'll talk about as we dig into some more packages. As I go through these packages, you'll see some where I'll show you what would you do if you didn't have this package. For the HTTP package, I had no way of showing that to you, so I'm not going to try and completely mock up what you would have to do if you didn't have this package. I also want to shout out there are some other really good HTTP clients out there. Don't limit yourself just to this one. Another notable one is Dio, so if you use Dio, no problems there. Just again, both those packages are top tier, and for this basic example, I decided to use the HTTP package. Our second package is Dart-Z. This might be one that you haven't heard of, depending on how you structure your repositories. But let's quickly look at our coffee repository here, which is how we're going to actually access those coffee items. And I've done a little bit of abstraction and made an API repository that we are extending from here. So something that Dart does not do a great job at, that other languages do, is force you to handle errors. So the reason we use this Dart-Z package is it uses some functional programming concepts where we can actually return either an exception or a successful response from the repository. The reason you would do this is if you're working with a lot of junior developers, you want to take away as much freedom from them as possible so that they can make as few mistakes as possible. By doing this, we can actually force them to have to deal with the error in case it's present. So no more just wrapping things with try-catch in your qubits or your blocks or whatever state management you're using and hoping it works out. Using this, you can actually force them to have to deal with that in the presentation layer in your state management, which is a huge advantage here. So the alternative would be, again, the try-catches, but this is something that we've started to do a lot and we really recommend. This also allows you to make your own exception classes, which is this request exception here, where you can pass messages, status codes, or you can actually pass human readable error codes, which you can then later surface in the presentation layer of your app. So it's just going to be one of those nice touches that'll make sure if anyone touches your code later on, they're less likely to screw it up, and it'll also add a little bit of human readability to the end user experience. Next is going to be JSON serializable. So this one and our next package as well are very popular. They're both part of code generation. So for this example, I have this coffee.dart class here, which is our data class that we're parsing that JSON into. And at the top here is the JSON serializable example. So these 10 lines of code allow us to spin up a data class that has a from JSON method and a to JSON method that you know is going to work based on just these parameters inputs. If you did not use this, your code would look something more like this. You will come up with a normal Dart class, and then you'd have to write these from JSON methods yourself and to JSON methods yourself. That's not necessarily that bad, except you also should test those from JSON methods and to JSON methods, which means if you're writing these yourself by hand, they're error prone, and you're just going to run into more issues here. It saves you a lot of time. All of the JSON serializable package uses build runner to automatically generate this .g file, which, as you can see, writes this copy from JSON and copy to JSON method for you, which is awesome that you just don't have to worry about that. You don't have to check these files into source control either, because normally in your CI/CD platform, you'd automatically generate these files at compile time and build time. So that way, there's no chance of anybody messing them up. The next package that we're going to talk about is Freezed. Freezed is something that I like to use on my data classes, as well as you've seen Block start to adopt this. Freezed adds a lot of nice utility methods to it, the most notable of which is called copy with. If we're going to dig into one of our qubits here, the coffee detail qubit. There we go. You can actually use it for states. So you'll see here there's another file that's generated called freezed. So coffee detail qubit.freeze.dart. And what this is actually doing is it's extending this state here. So by marking it with this annotation and these, it will automatically take on the code generation time all of your variables and generate some extra methods like this copy with method. So what this allows you to do is, instead of instantiating a new object and copying over by hand all of the various variables that are the same, just to change one or two, you can call this state.copywith method. This works really well with Qubit if you just want to have one normal state and not a bunch of named states like a block system. But you can just change one variable and emit that new state, and then if you've set up your presentation layer right, it will rebuild the appropriate things. So this, again, saves you a lot of time. These files don't need to be checked into source control, and they're auto-generated, so you can leave them out of your tests and your code coverage, assuming that you would trust these packages. Next, of course, is Block. So I have two different examples for Block here, both using Qubit. I've recently switched over to Qubit for a lot of my projects, and I've been enjoying it a lot because I feel like you can get a very similar to Block experience if you want it, all using Qubit. So we've already looked at this example with this state where there's just one type of state, and we just change the variables within it. On the coffee list view, there's a separate example where we actually have multiple named states with the initial loading loaded in error. And this plays very nicely if we start looking at the presentation logic, where we can do a block builder, and then basically when the state's initial, we want to show a loading state. If it's loading, we want to show a loading state. If it's loaded successfully, loaded, and then an error state error. This is all very human readable, which is excellent, and it also allows for easy abstraction. So we can look at that loaded state here, and I can just pass it the parameters that that specific widget needs, and then go ahead and build out the UI logic from there. Again, tons of state managements out there. State management is one of the biggest debates in the Flutter world. What I tend to tell people is just choose one. They all manage state very well. There's a bunch of great options out there from Provider, Block, and RiverPod, and there's new ones every single day. Just choose one, learn it, whatever you're most comfortable with, and stick with it. I will say the reason I use Block for examples like this is I tend to see Block as the most widely used at larger companies, and I think it's a great place to start. So if you're learning Flutter and you need to pick up your first state management, just go with this. A lot of places use this, and then after you're comfortable with this, then try out the other ones to see if you prefer this. Next up is GoRouter. This is another new package that I've started using in a lot of my projects. And what it does is it's a declarative routing system. The navigation system to me has always felt a little not great out of native Flutter, and I think a lot of you probably feel the same. It's something that they did recently improve on, but GoRouter makes this really simple. So if we were to head over, we have a routing folder under presentation, and we have two different files here. One of these is optional, and that's the routes. I highly recommend doing this. This is basically just assigning names to your routes, so that way you don't have to worry about remembering what they are or having somebody make a typo. Anywhere you're going to navigate, you can just call the variable, and you know that it's always going to go to the place that you want it to. But most importantly, with GoRouter, you have another file where you can set up this configuration, and this is probably the most basic version of GoRouter you'll ever see, which is just a path, a builder, In this case, we have a redirect, just checking to make sure a variable is there before we allow somebody to go to this page. But these kind of options are what make GoRouter exceptionally powerful. They're basically going to give you middleware support to be able to say, you can't go to this page if you're not authenticated, or if this variable's null, or whatever it is, and automatically redirect you to the page that you want to go. So this, in a completely separate file away from all of your other business logic, is just going to be able to make it very nice and easy to organize your routing system, and all the named routes and everything will play well with Flutter Web. So if you have a Flutter Web project, whatever you set up, these path names will also show in the URL bar, so it's just a great overall experience here. To actually initialize the router, it's also very simple. You can go to your material app, and you can just call materialapp.router and then pass your router into the router config here, which makes it very simple. I do have the example here, not complete again, because I'm not going to rebuild all the middleware and all the awesome features that GoRouter comes with. But if you needed a basic routing setup, you might have something like using onGenerateRoute with an onGenerateRoute method that's going to pass the route settings, and then you'd have a ugly switch case that's going to basically generate all of those routes based on the route names that you would set up. So GoRouter is great, especially if you have an advanced app with a whole bunch of routes. You need to use some sort of routing system. This one has become extremely popular, as you can see by the likes, the pub points, and popularity. So I wouldn't go against the grain on something like this. Use what other people are using. It's proven to work. A lot of people are behind it, and I definitely think you should try it in your app if you haven't already. Next up, this one was really just to add a little bit of spice to the UI, but this is the Flutter staggered grid view. So Flutter comes out of the box with normal grid views, and this allows you to get this kind of offset pattern. So if we head over to our coffee list view, you'll see in our loaded state that we actually have a new type of grid delegate. It still uses the normal grid view widget out of material, but you pass it this special delegate, and this will actually allow you to make these cool patterns, and then you can invert it with certain options here. So this allows you to just add a little bit of variety. This kind of gives you an Instagram explore page feel, where it's not just a normal grid, but it allows you to do a couple more interesting designs. This one is really popular. Masonry designs are really popular coming from our design team. So it's just something you need to have in your back pocket. This is pretty hard to achieve if you didn't have it, or if you weren't using the staggered grid view. And again, the normal staggered view, what it would look like, I can change it real quick. I haven't tried this, so here we go. And if we give this a hot refresh. So this is what the out-of-the-box Flutter would look like just with a normal cross-axis count. So again, it kind of makes it a little bit more interesting having the staggered, something that we do use fairly often. Awesome. Next is cache network image. This one's been around for quite a while. You notice that when we hot refresh this, the images load in fairly nicely. Again, this is all hosted locally, so this is the fastest you'll ever see images load. Normally it's way worse than this. And for this example, I do want to show what it would look like without it. So let me head over to my coffee card class here and change this to image.network. So you'll notice now when I refresh this, they kind of just pop in a kind of staggered way, and that's already not great, but really where the issue comes in is every time you go to this image, it's going to reload it again and not from cache. So what this means is when I go to a different page, this is still using the cache network image, but when I go back, the images have to reload. So on a navigation piece that should feel seamless, you're going to see images reload coming back to it, which just isn't a great experience. So using this cache network image just makes everything a lot smoother. So I'll demo that again here so we can see that. So all these images will load in nicely. This one will not have to load because it's already been loaded on the index view, and going back again, these won't load, or they'll have a nice cache little fade in. So that's another nice, just little polishing aspect there. Again, super widely used, not perfect on the pub points, but this is so widely used and it's been around for a long time. It's pretty much industry standard. Anyone have any questions?
I was just curious what it this time. That was all.
Okay. And I think this is the last one. Yep. So last up is Hive. So I did add a little feature here because I wanted to showcase this project, but basically you can add your coffee to favorites if black coffee is my favorite or whatever. And this will persist if I go to different screens and then come back, and it will persist that this was in my favorites. Hive is a really popular Flutter local storage system, and it's very, very quick to the point where once you initialize it, it's not actually asynchronous to do reads and writes because it reads it that quickly, and it's very easy to set up. So I also have a I think I called it a local provider, I might have called it a Hive provider. So you have what's called a box here, and a box you basically assign it a path that you want all of this information stored, and then a name, and it'll allow you to very easily just put any object you want and read any object you want. So it's a map style or key value pair type of local storage, and it's just very quick, it's very easy to use. There are some other packages you can use to do similar things to this, like shared preferences, but this is truly a database, so it's very quick. It beats out SQLite, stuff like that in speed, and it's very, very easy to use. So highly recommend this project here if you're doing anything with local storage. Again, if you weren't using local storage, you could always use some sort of backend API to store these, or Firebase or something like that. Awesome. So that was a lot of packages. These are things that you're going to see us here and me and my personal projects using pretty much on every single project. We've used these packages for quite a long time. As you can see, they all have very specific use cases, a lot of which are either to buy back your time by generating code for you that you'd have to otherwise write, or adding a little bit of extra polish to an app to give a better end user experience. Again, there's 45,000 packages to choose from, and I didn't pick just the top 10 on the like list. I tried to pick some that I know that we used all the time, but I do encourage you, go look at the Flutter favorites list and just sort by likes on pub.dev and go through them. You will see a huge amount of really amazing packages and teams that put in a lot of work for those, for us to be able to use those packages. So go support them, drop likes on all of your favorite packages, and also contribute when you can. All right. Next time, we're going to be exploring using Dart for your backend. And before I take any questions on everything, I do want to give one shout out. Mike sent me this today, and there's a good book bundle. If you want to read about software architecture, you can donate at least $25 and get 15 different books on software fundamentals and architecture. A portion of the proceeds will go to charity. And I think, Mike, if they have any other questions on that, I'll redirect them to you specifically. Sure. I just wanted this to be up here. It's through Humble Bundle. So if you go to humblebundle.com, you can find this pack. And yeah, check it out. Does anyone have any questions on packages? Yeah.
So let's talk about the packages themselves and trying to figure out, you notice that some of them had some presence in GitHub or open source type work. How do you know if a package has the ability for you to access the source of the package? And maybe the counter to that question is, how many packages are closed source, so they just provide the binary or the object you need to wrap into your project?
I believe, I want to say on pub.dev, they have to have a open GitHub.
Okay.
I think so too.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one that didn't have one. Now you could host your own private packages on a private server, but pub.dev, I can pull it up real quick. They all will have a GitHub link, so let's just go to Flutter.
There was one story where you had a very fundamental package, I forget if it was a JavaScript or a Python package. The guy basically got pissed off and took it and went home with it, and everything else was dependent upon it fell apart. So just be careful if you're starting to use packages like this, you understand where your dependencies are.
Yeah. Yeah, so most of these you will be able to find the GitHub repository right here on the side. And again, this is a really big one. So you can see all the different issues and pull requests. This is a good thing to get in the habit of. If you're having an issue with a package, check here first. Don't search Stack Overflow or Google. Normally, you're going to find the issue in here if you're running into it.
The secondary reason we do that is because if we're building applications for a client, we want to do a security code scan against the code base. And if you have a closed source, you can't do that too well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next question.
Also, if you're doing it with what you're describing, you would probably want to fork that specific version of the package to have it hosted separately.
With 45,000 packages, how do you go fish on this? Like, is there a Reddit group or a particular Discord group you would go to that says, I'm looking for such and such, can you please advise and get, publicly source that help?
The search typically isn't bad. I know this one exists, but if I wanted like a circular progress indicator, this is another popular one. Let's see. Percent indicator is what it's called. So this is just like a collection of pre-built percent indicators and all sorts of things there. So again, when you search it, obviously what I'm looking at these three main key metrics right here. And I am not going to pick one unless I see probably 1,000 plus likes, honestly, or a significant amount of likes compared to the other packages, just because I know this one's going to have the activity. Typically published 6 months ago is even starting to push it, but pure Dart packages can last that long without having to be updated. But most of your top packages you're going to be seeing updated like every 2 months at the least.
I'd vouch for Diego though.
Huh?
I'd vouch for Diego though.
Yeah.
So as a follow-up, there's a website I use frequently called fluttergems.com, which is like a curated collection of top packages, and they have them subdivided by different wants and needs.
Nice.
It's been really helpful.
I haven't seen this before. This is cool.
Yeah, they will also tell you the maintenance status of the packages too.
Oh yeah, that's true. If you go into one of them, they offer some additional metrics.
Yeah, drill down into it, they'll tell you whether it's being maintained actively or not.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. If you click on one more. Yeah.
What powers that actively maintained? Do you know?
I think it's based on GitHub activity.
Okay. I wonder if that's a feature that pub.dev will eventually pull in.
That would be nice.
Should.
Awesome. Yep.
I was going to say a couple of things, but one of which is sometimes you want to figure out to do, like, let's say you wanted a simple circular progress bar,
Yep.
but a little bit more than what they had, and you don't really necessarily want to pull in a whole package. You can go to the GitHub and see how they did it, and it gives you an idea with it.
Yeah.
So you don't need to go and necessarily pull in a whole package to do one little thing. And then I wanted to maybe disagree with you. I don't know if that's allowed, but
It's always allowed.
on the generated code, I like checking the generated code in because that means that if a like a minor update happens to the package, it can't change my code out from under me in a way I don't know what's happening.
So what we typically do, we normally do nightly builds. So what we're going to have, whether we're touching the code or not, we do have it run every pull request as well. But every night we'll automatically generate that code. And normally if something changes in the generated code, we're going to get some sort of compile error or a test will fail. So we haven't had too much issues there. What I try and avoid is somebody accidentally making a typo in one of those files. So I think it's a risk that you're going to take on one way or the other.
Oh, yeah, you probably shouldn't be editing those files directly, ever.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
But
that's, so that's, if you could maybe, I don't know, yeah. Anyway.
if they're in the editor, you never know what's going to happen.
And I have a tendency to check my log files. I know there's a lot of disagreement on whether you should do that or not too. I like checking the log files for the same reason.
Yeah, we do check the log files because that ensures that the pub packages are the exact version you had it when you had it working. Any other questions? Yeah, I had one, Richard. I saw it.
It's going to ask the difference between the likes, the popularity, and the pub points.
Let's pull one of these up again. So, transparently, I'm not quite sure where the popularity percentage is coming from. But the likes are actually somebody like clicking this like button.
The likes seem easy enough to figure out.
And the pub points are too.
It's-
Yeah, and then the pub points, it breaks down here for you, so you get 10 points for providing a valid pub spec, 5 points for providing valid. So it does some just basic kind of static analysis to make sure.
Popularity is usage.
Is usage, okay, that's good.
Yeah, but there's no package that's used by everybody, so 100% can't mean 100%.
Well, then whatever metric you need. I mean,
You know what I'm saying, though?
it's probably indexed.
Yeah.
So it's
Pretty much
used,
right.
it's used by as many as
Yeah.
most other on an index.
It's gotta be on a curve.
Awesome. Any other questions or notable packages y'all want to call out to everybody here?
Just a comment, I guess, for the Flutter Hive packages you mentioned. Have you come across any, I'd say, add-on packages for Hive that kind of add more asset-specific type features to it? Because the problem with key value stores is it kind of locks you into very simple schemas and you don't have indexing and things like that. When you have more sophisticated use case for, let's say, a proper asset compliant database, is there a way for Hive, because to be honest with you, I started using Hive and then I dropped it because my requirements were a little bit more complicated than what Hive could fulfill, but I love the speed of it.
Yeah,
And then I ended up switching to Drift.
to Drift?
Yeah, so, but Drift, it works fine. I mean, it has the speed, it's very sophisticated. I love the fact that you can stream the queries out.
Yeah.
And you can update your state through those, and so essentially your views reflect whatever is in the Drift table. But I was wondering if you've come across anything like that for Hive, or is it just a simple key value store?
I think it is meant to be a simple key value store. I will say I haven't built any apps that are so offline capable that needed that. So I know Drift, the one that you picked, the team behind that with the stream, that's a great team. So I'm sure that's well maintained.
Oh, it's great, yeah.
Mike's got his.
Have you looked into Realm at all?
I have not looked into Realm either.
Realm I did very early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but frankly, the ORM capabilities of Drift and the streaming stuff that they had built in, and it was just a little further ahead.
Okay. The reason I say Realm is because that's my experience with doing native development on iOS and Android, a common
Yeah,
repository for things working.
exactly. Drift will work with pretty much all platforms that Flutter supports. Maybe not web, but everything else.
A cute little package I like is a Flutter blur hash.
Oh, I've seen this one.
This is really kind of cool. So if you've got, if you're loading some good sized images and stuff like that, what you can do is you can give it a very tiny string, with it, but without loading before you load the thing, and that's actually your fallback. So when you do your network cached image or whatever, you give it that as the fallback, and so it shows that it's the right size. You're gonna have the right size for what it is. It's the right aspect ratio. It's got the right size, and then when you put it in the image, it actually just replaces the image in, and so it's a pretty neat way to especially if they're larger images.
Yeah, it'll give a nice fade experience. And I think you can also change the granularity with this. Am I right on that? Where you can have,
Maybe, but if you do, it would raise the size of it. Because if you go back and look,
Yeah.
if you go back at the example there, that the image on the left, I don't know how big the image is, but it turns it into that string.
Yeah.
30 bytes.
So do you store the hash?
Yeah. Yeah. So if it's a known image, like if it's a known image, you would just use that hash as your to create your fallback image. If it's not, you can still just that's a lot quicker to get than downloading the image. So if you know you're going to be displaying 7 hefty images, you could actually also at the same time return back, or before you load the images, you return back the blur hashes, and once again you're showing something really quick. So they've got like an apparent experience that looks really cool, and then it fades into the actual image. Yeah, it's
How do you generate the hash?
it's in there.
yeah, that's probably.
It's in there. It's in there.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure you feed it an image and it gives you that. Just
yeah.
a function call.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something you would do in advance. You wouldn't be doing this like. I don't think you would even be doing this on the back end before you return something. You would be doing it in advance.
Oh, okay.
So like for example,
Generate a hash
if you're
for
reading
every
out of a
single image,
database, if you're reading these out of a database, you could have the blur hash is one of the, fields as well as the location. Yeah,
I do believe there is a way to generate this on the back end if you wanted to. So for example, you could have your image upload to Firebase storage or cloud storage
Exactly.
or somehow, and then have a cloud function trigger and generate those and
Yeah.
the variable sizes you might need for
Right.
access.
and then when you're loading it, you get that back, and you could cache a whole bunch of those.
Yeah.
And it just because one of the problems with loading images from network is if you don't have the right aspect ratio or size or something, now all of a sudden your page is rebuilding in different as it loads images, it's actually rebuilding it. I hate that experience. Where you're reading down on something and it jumps because something just loaded in. So this kind of thing helps you know that. So it's awesome. That's one I like. It's kind of off the wall.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments?
Is there like a way to search the absolute least favorite package on pub.dev? Like, what is the worst one?
Well, there have been several that have been abandoned, like before SoundWall safety. So
They
You can
don't.
sort by most likes.
here, you go to the last page.
Just go to
Here.
page.
It would take me a long time.
Do they go through and like abandoned packages? Do they go through and clear them out every now and again?
There are lots of discussions that happen on that because how do you take over a package that someone else had or whatever? There's and Google does not want to be in the job of determining when that's happening or not happening or whatever. So what's happened in the past is like someone like the like Flutter community will jump in and they'll just they'll fork it and they'll just create their own. It's like a version 2 of it. So like one of the ones that had at the bottom there was Device Info Plus was one of the ones it said there. And that's something else I wanted to say actually. Sorry. There you go. That was a bad one.
There it is.
10 years ago.
Yep.
Which I
Yeah.
don't know, I guess from like.
Brandon, that's not your package, is it?
What was that?
I didn't know if it was Brandon's package or not.
Yeah, humble brag.
One of the things to be aware of is like, okay, so one of the packages that was like when you were on the main page there, down at the bottom, it mentioned Device Info Plus.
Mhm.
Okay, that, if you want to go get the version of it on there, this package goes and busts the cache. Okay, well, on my project, we've got CloudFront there that's feeding stuff out, and so I don't want that because that's going to slow storage to get that out. That takes a second and a half more than it should to just go get that. And so what do? Well, what you can do is, I can try to put a PR back in, which I've actually talked to them a little bit about it, but I haven't gone and done it. Majid actually put the change in that did it, but what you can do, what I did is I actually forked the project because it's not a real active thing. I forked it and I made the changes, and then in your pubspec.yaml, you can actually you can tell it to go to a directory to pull the package, or you can tell it to go to a specific commit in a repo, or you can tell it just go to a different repo for it. So you can specify all of that in your pubspec.yaml. So you've got the power to actually take a package, make it your own, and then you can still use it in normal Flutter ways without having to tear out everything and do whatever you need. Because I had one little change I wanted to make. I did not want to do that cache busting.
Yeah.
And so that was easy to do.
Yeah, we've done that several times, especially if you're doing package development, you'll likely have an example project set up with it locally referencing your, the package that you're actually building for development.
Well, and I've got a monorepo. And in my monorepo, I've got a couple of packages. So I just, it's the package, and I give it the directory of .. / consumer engine.
Mhm.
So, sorry.
No, all good. Anybody else? Awesome. Well, I'm gonna pack all of this up now. I'm gonna shut down the stream. Normally we walk over to Reformation. It is Taste of Woodstock tonight, so if you're gonna come to Reformation, walk, don't drive. You will not find parking down there.
That sound looks crazy.
So, yeah, let me get packed up and we'll head over.